Hello, my name is Lucy, and for this week discussion, I want to walk you through how I would evaluate a global onboarding program. But more importantly, I would also approach it as a re-evaluator, not just someone checking boxes. Now, before I look at the scenario, this week's reading shaped how I was thinking. I read this website content around microlearning that helped me understand how learning is changing. I also read the chapter 12 and 13 of the textbook Evaluation in Organization, and it really grounded me on how to collect data properly, especially through surveys and interviews. So I'm not just designing an evaluation, I'm thinking about how to collect data that actually means something. And let's look at the Zorg industry scenario, which is the scenario that we were given this week. And honestly, the scale of the project stood out for me. So we're talking about onboarding 200 to 300 employees every 90 days across 21 countries using a 6 month micro learning program. So immediately I'm thinking this is not just a simple training evaluation, this is actually system evaluation. But the real issue isn't even the scale, it's the effectiveness, because even after training, employees couldn't remember policies and they couldn't explain the 5 elements of the organization. So the problem here is not that they did not attend training. It's did they learn anything and can they use what they have learned? And this is where micro learning comes in. From the reading, micro learning works because it breaks learning into smaller pieces that are easier to process and revisit. So Zog didn't just redesign the training randomly. They were trying to fix retention. But now the question becomes, did it actually work? So to answer that, I would use a phased mixed method evaluation design. And what I mean by that is I wouldn't wait until the end of the check result. I will evaluate the program while it's still happening and again at the end. Because think about it, this program runs for 6 months. Learning is happening gradually, lessons by lesson. So if we wait until the end, we'll miss everything in between, where people got confused, where they disengaged, and where learning actually dropped. Now, once I know when I'm evaluating, the next question is how do I collect the data? So I would use a combination of short, Likert skill surveys, knowledge checks, and then interview, or even focus group because no single tool actually tells the full story. So I would use the blend of all of them. And this is where the reading in chapter 12 of the textbook really guided me. Surveys are powerful, but only if they are designed properly. So the question have to be clear, simple, and focused on one idea at a time. Especially in this case where learners are using mobile devices, we cannot afford long and confusing surveys. But surveys alone are not enough because they tell what's happening but not why. And that's where those interviews come in. From the chapter 3 of the textbook, using semi-structured interviews allow you to ask consistent questions but still dig deeply when needed. And that's important in a global program like this where context really, really matters. So now the big decision is where do we place these tools? And for me, it's not at just one point. It's after each micro lessons, at the end of each module, and at the end of the full program. Because we're not just measuring results, we are tracking the learning journey. Of course, this kind of setup comes with risk, and the biggest one here is participation because it is a self paced program across multiple countries. People may skip surveys or even drop off completely. So, to manage that, I will reduce friction as much as possible, embed the surveys directly into the learning platform, keep them short, use reminders and incentive because if people don't respond, I won't have data, and without data, I can't evaluate anything. And this is where everything connects back to the readings this week. Designing surveys properly improves reliability, meaning we get consistent responses, and combining surveys with interviews improves validity, meaning we actually understand what's going on. So it's not just about collecting data, it's about collecting very useful data. So if I had to summarize everything in one sentence, it would be evaluation should follow how learning happens. And in this case, learning is continuous, flexible, and distributed, so evaluation must follow the same. These are the reasons that shaped my thinking around this scenario discussion, especially around micro learning and data collection strategy. Thank you for listening.